Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining by. It's at almost the closing of CollabSphere already, so we're in the last leg, I think. This is Dev 110, Keep Your APIs Coming. We'll take you on a whirlwind tour through a Vue.js-based single-page application, which makes use of the new HCL Domino REST APIs. But before we get started with that, a big thank you once again to the sponsors of CollabSphere. Without their patience and their support, a conference like this with that kind of professionalism in a virtual world would not have been possible. So go to check out their offerings, check out their products, and thanks again for making this event possible for us.
Thank you, CollabSphere team and sponsors.
Oh yeah, right. You shouldn't forget the CollabSphere team, right? Okay, so what do we have in stock today for you? We will talk a little bit and really briefly about who we are and about our own Canadian user group, C3UG, because we have something new in stock for you as well. And Colin will tell us a little bit more about that in a minute. And then we'll go through a quick chart where I tell you what this session is about and what it's not about. I think it's good practice now for a couple of iterations that we did with sessions like this to tell people up front what we're talking about and what not. So you can make your way early in the game to another session if this is not something of interest to you. We will then talk a little bit about the use case of the application that we're looking at some architectural charts, go through the components of the applications that make this all up, and then we'll talk a little bit of why we did things the way we did them, and we'll talk a little bit about the backend, the new boy in town, which is HCL Domino REST API, the artist formerly known as Keep, and then we'll wrap it up. And with that, let's head on over to you, Colin, to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. I'm Colin Breckles with Castlebrek. If you've seen some of our C3UG videos, one of the core organizing team of C3UG as well. And we've been straight up digital for about 2.5, going on 3 years now, I think, and gotten a lot of good feedback, and we're constantly looking for suggestions on what people might want to see more of. So next slide. And the C3UG. Our YouTube channel is where we post most of our content. You may know that we already released the first course, which was on the HCL Domino App Dev Pack. And as Heiko mentioned, we've got something up our sleeve. Our latest incarnation is a lot about front-end development, talking to a back-end application, which of course can use Keep. And specifically, we'll be using React.js for the front end. And it's going to allow us to take our time and go through and show you how to build something like this brick by brick. What I'll actually do is share my screen really quickly here. So we've already got the first of the videos in this series recorded. And what we actually started with, it helps to show you what the heck we're building. So the expense report application, it's a pretty common use case people are familiar with, and the intent is to build all of it without using third-party, other than the React framework itself. You know, we're not going to be using a bunch of pre-built components. We're going to be doing it with straight CSS. We're going to do it with modern CSS. So a lot of people get pretty hung up on, well, they get stuck because they start with a framework for layout and visuals, and it gets them so far. But when they want it to do something that's sort of outside of its templated look and feel, they run into challenges. And so using modern CSS, and you really have a lot of control, and it's fun to build beautiful things. And so really quickly, this is where we're starting. So this is a wireframe written in Adobe XD. The first in the series shows the creation of this wireframe, which may be of interest, or people may want to skip to the second one where we start dev. And then just to give you a behind the scenes idea, we're also redoing the Castlebrek website, and this is the wireframe from the designer. Not a plug for us. We literally just finished this, and we built it with React.js, Next.js for server-side rendering, and you can do static site generation. Heiko and I have talked about this on many occasions in the past, and sometimes you don't necessarily want a node interpreter running on the server. So if you do static site generation, it outputs all the pages in your site. And you can build coarse-grained or fine-grained things. So if you look, this tiny little bit of markup you see here is the whole page, because they're pretty coarse-grained things. So There's a component called app layout that literally does the whole layout. There's content bars that do full width and whatnot. And so if you look at like a page like this sample page, we've got different content bars with a color theme: tertiary, secondary, primary. I'll show you that in the browser really quickly. And these are the things we're going to talk about in the course: is how to build nice, fine-grained and coarse-grained components. So here's a page with different styles and just how easy it is to do that. Pick a color theme and apply it throughout. And then if you want to do something fancy, like on the contact page, we decided to put a video background. Video backgrounds are pretty hot. And that's an MP4 video. And people get real angry if you trash their cellular data plan. So when you go mobile, it's a static image. And if there's a little bit of a dark art to doing stuff like this, so it resizes at every page. When you do things like the hero component, there's a lot of CSS media queries to make it work. So when you're full page desktop, you'll actually see that everything resizes. There's a bunch of breakpoints with media queries. So you might notice, see how the image jumps over? You can tell you're hitting a breakpoint. And you'll notice the text starts to change. And you can make it, you have a lot of control over SEO. If it's a public facing site that matters, you have a lot of control over the performance of it, and you have a lot of control over accessibility. And accessibility is super important now for any public facing sites and as well as corporate apps. And finally, if you do static site generation, the way it actually works is you have this pages directory. Anything you put in the pages directory automatically gets picked up as a URL. So you can do crazy stuff like go direct to a page and do a refresh and it'll load properly. So you can have deep links and they work, everything works. So it's actually pretty cool. So going back to the C3UG course, our site's not live yet. It's replacing a janky WordPress site built by an agency years ago that we've been really bad about updating. Thank you, customers who love us and keep doing business with us, even though our website's not the best. This will be a step up. So this screen you see here, we'll be making a bunch of components, menus, headers, data grids, charts, footers. All of it's responsive, all of it resizes. So it's a lot on the look and feel. And then finally, working with data, how do you call into it? And we'll be able to, because it's a video series, we can go step by step. But with that, I'm going to stop sharing, hand it back over to Heiko, because he's got a whole lot to show you today, and it's a treat. Take it away, Heiko.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, so that's an outlook of what's coming and what keeps us busy for the next couple of months, probably. So stay tuned on that. Just to carry on, a couple words about myself. I think you can read that, and for the sake of time, I'll skip that over. And let's check in about what is this session about. We're talking about JavaScript-based application development, right? We don't, and I know there's certain elements in a lot of people in the community that are very Java-minded and Java opinionated. Sorry, not today. So if you want to see something about Java, that's not the right session for you. Also, we had a great session from Tilo Wolbrich already on the first day of the conference about your low-code primer, on how to set up Keep and how to get your feet wet with it, and how to install it, and how to maneuver around a couple of problems that you might run into. So this is also not what we're doing today. So if you want to look for somebody who tells you how to set up Keep, go ask Tilo and check out his session from Tuesday, I think. We'll talk about a couple of architectural patterns on what we're building and how we tailor applications into different layers. We'll look into code a lot. And we're talking about, as I said before, multi-tier applications. And yes, the application front end will be based on Vue.js. If you like any other flavor, like React or Angular or be whatever you like, everything that we talk about today is a sample, and you can build it in every other web front-end framework, no matter what. So don't bear with us if it's Vue.js. I think we'll make it as easy as possible to digest for you as possible. So and to make things work with another front-end framework in the JavaScript one for you. Let's take a look at the use case, what we're going to build. And we're going to build the classic user registration application. And maybe before going through the use case itself, let's demo that thing, so it's better to look at it. So this is basically the front end we're building. We're building a very simple Material UI-based front end, which gives us a registration component. And this application has been built before that demo, so bear with us why we did this, and I'll tell you that in a minute. So first of all, we can give it, we can select the username that we want to work with in the future in the system where we register for, and for us, the C3HE website. We'll give it a password. And it'll take us through this nice stepper component here where we select, and for the sake of time, I'll fill all that with my stuff out with a couple of fields that we need to fill out, like first name, last name, company and stuff. An email address, of course, because we will receive a callback from the application, which will send us an email where we have to click on a double opt-in to activate our account. So this will be done in a minute as well. We'll then get a confirmation screen, and then we can create the account, and this is basically the whole front-end application and stepper component that we'll take a look at. Now, in the meantime, yeah, and thank God we're sending an email through Domino. This is the registration confirmation email where we have a link in here as well, which we can click on, and then the application will actually activate our account and move it into from a accounts database on the Domino server into a directory assistance hooked up address book, and also salt the password so we can immediately log into the Domino server if there would be a second process in place that gives us access through groups or anything else. But this can be easily done and achieved in this sample. That's the scenario that we go through, and our API will respond as well. So okay, I didn't fix the break here in the HTML template, but anyways, it'll respond and say, okay, we'll have you activated. You can now log in. So that's basically the use case, and that's literally the thing that we want to go through in this use case. So we have this register component. We call that calls the VUE app. This checks the username with a DB query, with a database query on the Domino against the Domino server, whether the username is still available. If the username is available, we can register. We can continue on. We can go through the submit process, create the account, write it to the database. Then the API that we have in the middle here sends the confirmation email. This gets sent by Domino SMTP mail. This gets back to the client. The client confirms. The email writes the API, then writes the account into the address book, changes the state in the account database, and returns an HTML stuff to the user to say, okay, thank you, the process was successful. I have a couple of screenshots here. I think we saw you saying the demo. If you're interested in taking the demo yourself, you can do that now. I'll give you a couple of minutes to, if you want to just check it out. You can use this the link in the middle, or you can just use the QR code to get to the site and give it a shot. In the meantime, I can show you a little bit of the Domino part that is involved here. So let's move my notes area over here, and in this case we have our accounts database, which is currently empty, but it should have one in here. This is my activated account that I created a minute ago with the username Hogwarts and my credentials. And if I look into my partner address book, then you don't see there's no Heiko void care. Now if I refresh that account is here, and if I look at the properties, the password, this is correctly salted and done. This is done by calling a load script agent from the REST API through the REST APIs in this existing database. And we'll go through these items now to just check those things out. Let's just see if there's somebody else trying. Oh yeah, look at this. So bear in mind, you have to give us a working email address so the email can actually get back to you. Yeah, it's already activated, so we should have Karsten in the address book now. Let's take a look. Maybe I have to refresh the view first. There we go already, right? Let's see. No? Okay. Ah, there he is. Yeah, there he is. So that worked out. Nobody else tried it? Okay, fine. Anyways, let's carry on. So at least it's you see it's not a demo. This is really a live application, so you can use it right away. Coming to a couple of architectural things. So how is this built out? We have, this is, as I said, this application has been there before. It has been built using the Domino App Pack before. So in the initial version that we have built, we have built a REST API for this application and used DominoDB and the Proton task to talk to Domino. It built a VUE.JS application that is hosted on an Nginx reverse proxy and then downloaded to the client in the web browser. It's a single page application, executes in the client, which talks through a HTTP client doing REST calls against our own REST API, which then traverses the Domino-related features and functionalities in the initial version into DominoDB calls and then over to Proton on the Domino server. So what is changing then? Well, not really much, right? The only thing that we change is we don't use DominoDB anymore in our API stack. We'll exchange it with an HTTPS client as well. And we're going to use, on the Domino servers, we're going to use the Domino REST APIs. For the sake of the size of the box, I'll just stuck with the name keep here. Of course, it's the HCL Domino REST APIs. So this is basically the only big change that we have to incorporate from an architectural point of view, right? Everything else literally should stay the same and could stay the same. So let's take this piece up from the bottom to the top. And the first thing that we're going to take a quick look at is the VUE.JS front-end application. So obviously, how did we build this? Well, we built it with VS Code, and it used the VUE.JS framework and the VUE.JS command line interface to create the project. We used a material UI framework for VUE.JS, which is Vuetify, which gave us this pretty nice, almost ready to run component for building this stepper control to walk through each and every step in the registration process. And we're using a HTTPS client framework for JavaScript, which is called Axios, to do our REST calls. We developed this on Node.js and using VS Code, and we'll deploy it to an Nginx reverse proxy. But this could also be the final version that you're deploying into production. Could also be hosted through the Domino HTML directory, or Keep has its own store for that as well. So you make use of the HTTP stack that Keeps gives you, which also, like in comparison to Nginx, also makes use of HTTP2 performance optimizations that you might gain from that. So both ways are possible in that space as well. How is this VUE.JS application structured? And this is just to give you a little bit of an overview. We have in the project itself, we have an index.html, which is the starting point. In a nutshell, it defines a div where we render the app into. The app itself consists of a main JavaScript component that actually does the mounting of the rendering into the HTML part up there, and also imports the rendered component, which is the app.vue file, and also does some prototype definitions, and those are pretty interesting, and I will show you that in a minute in the code itself. The app.vue file actually contains the scaffolding, the HTML scaffolding that we had, like the menu bar, the title bar that you saw, the grid that we use and stuff like that. And then we have a component. The component itself that gets rendered inside of app.vue is the registration component, which actually contains only the business logic and the rendering for our stepper component. It walks us through the design or the process of the registration component itself, and also contains the data that is located there. Let's take a look at what this looks like in the code. And I have to pick the right Visual Studio Code window right here, just to give you a quick overview of what this is. And I have sorted all of that out into a project structure, and all of my code is located into my source control folder. The Vue.js config file down here manages more or less the dependencies that we have in this project for Vue itself, which is our Vuetify component that we integrate to build, to have this material UI look and feel. And then, as I said, we have in the public folder, we have the index.html. And you can see right here, this is actually the only thing that we need that for. This is the div ID where we actually render our component later on. And it will give you, if you don't have JavaScript enabled in the browser, it gives you the NoScript stuff. So that's basically everything that this index.html is doing, besides rendering a couple of of CSS stuff. And one important thing, and you might have noticed it on the website, to make sure that we have only humans fill out that form and not bots, we use a reCAPTCHA control in there as well. So this gets loaded from Google here in the index.html, and there's a couple of things in the code itself that we see throughout the application that actually does another REST call to our API, and our API then verifies with Google that we have more or less a human-based transaction to really take the form and not being utilized by a bot. Okay, so that's basically the whole thing in the index.html. In the source folder, we have a couple of things that we already talked about. The main application, this is the main JavaScript file that more or less defines the framework for the Vue application. You can see we import the Vue here, we import our main application, our main rendering component here. Also Vuetify gets imported here, and our HTTP client Axios gets imported here, and also the captcha controls that are used in Vue itself are imported here. These get initialized here as well. So the initial conversation that there's a session happening based on a reCAPTCHA view is done automatically when the application gets loaded and it gets hooked up to Google with the respective API key that you need to get from Google there. A very interesting concept that I like about Vue is how you define, for example, things like features and functionality or functions that you need to call in subcomponents. In this case, we'll define a prototype, and we use that to create our essential Axios instance that talks to our REST API endpoint, which we have in an environment variable here. So we create this instance here in main.
And for people not familiar with Axios, Heiko? And for people who are not familiar with the Axios library?
Well, the Axios library is simply a tool that helps you to make HTTP requests, HTTPS requests. It's like the HTTP classes that you could use in LotusScript, for example, to make calls to other websites. It's basically a library that helps you do exactly that. So you can do get and post calls. You can do by HTTP calls, HTTPS calls to another website. That's basically all it does. And Axios can be used throughout our application by defining a so-called prototype instance. This prototype instance here gets automatically handed down in the component tree into each and every component. So we define our Axios endpoint, our API that we want to talk to, once in our main application, and inherit it down into the component tree. So we can make use of it in every subcomponent that we have inside of the application. So this is when we run across the Axios calls later down in the final component, we'll take a look at that. Then we have the mounting point, and this is basically the code that mounts this application instance that we call, and you see app is imported as app.vue into the index.html. That's that part. And then we have the main rendering component inside of the app.vue, which is built of, and each and every of these Vue components is captured into a template and into script components. We don't have that much in script here, besides another component that we're utilizing. This is the registration component, which is imported here. This is our the main implementation that we have. The template itself defines, as I said, the scaffolding of the application itself. So this is the header bar, the toolbar, and all the stuff that we see. And also it defines the place where we render our component that actually builds this dialog that we saw through the demo. And this is built in here. And again, this is the same pattern. We have a template which gives us the rendering of the HTML part, and we have a script part, and this script part actually gives us the interactions that we have within the components itself. So in the template, we defined this stepper object, and you can see those stepper items here. This is the first page, more or less. This is the second page, and so forth. Third page, fourth page. So all of that is defined with the respective Vue syntax in this template section. Then in the script section, we have two things. We have a data structure, which is sort of a model, the model that we use to work with the data in the fields that are defined upwards in the template itself. So this gives us the data structure for the user. You see the items that we have here, username, password, and stuff like that. We have a couple of validation rules that we want to be able to use. And then we have a lot of methods that go with this. And these methods are more or less the code and the actions that are getting fired when we click on something on the page itself, to make it easy for that. So this, for example, is the first call that gets out to our API, which checks whether our username is available or not. And this call, this account in use, gets fired when we click on the first next button from page 1 to the second page where we enter our personal data. And here we make use of our Axios component again that we defined in our main. And this is a call to our REST API endpoint. Accounts get check username, and we give it the username that we provide, that we have in our model, right? So, and if that's coming back okay, we will return true, and otherwise we'll break. And in that case, we'll give the user a message that this username is already taken. Same thing goes for when we want to create an account. This is just the code for the stuff that happens when we create an account. And you see at this time, we also do an Axios call, which is a post request in this time. So we have a body that we have to build up, and this is pasted in the back end right here. So this is the body data that we pass in, which is this one. Our user object, this is our model. So this .user is the model that we have. So all the field data that's coming from the form that we have. And the token, and the token is our captcha token that we have to pass in to make sure that it can be evaluated and can checked against the Google reCAPTCHA to see whether this is a human transaction or it's a bot or not, right? So that's happening here. Also, as functions or as methods are the validation steps and the steps itself to move from one page to the other. This is also coded in here in the script tag. And that's basically everything that's needed to build this front-end application. So it's pretty straightforward. We have very few files that we have to deal with, and they're nicely hooked up into each other and nicely encapsulated. So everything that belongs to a specific region and work is collected together. Let's head back to the application. So why do you use these front-end tools? Well, of course, the Nginx delivers the Vue application to the browser. Vue and Vuetify are rendering the Vue application, and we use Axios in various instances to make calls against our API, right? So that's basically the way how this front-end application is built up. We have seen all of this. We can skip over those ones, the middleware, and you can now flip to the middleware. And the middleware layer is, as you saw, is a Node.js Express application. It's our own REST API that we have built. And by the way, we have built all this application on top of an OpenNTF project. It's the Open Workspace project from Star Trek, and kudos go out to those guys who have made this great sample application available to use. So whenever you want to get started with a full stack application based on Vue.js and also on a middleware component and talking to a REST API, in this case also with the AppDev pack, but as we'll show you in a minute, it's not a big deal to make this work with Keep as well. That's a great project to get started with, right there. Of course, it's built, the server that we run the middleware on is Express.js. We use a couple of other components as well. Node Mailer is an SMTP client or an SMTP library that allows you to send SMTP mails, in our case through Domino. We will use Axios again. Axios is very versatile, so you can use it. As you can see, we can use the same HTTP client framework on the server side application as well as on the front-end application. And we will use a small, very tiny HTML templating framework, which is called Puck.js, to allow us to return an HTML rendering back to the client whenever you hit this click here button in your double opt-in email to activate your account, and you need some HTML back, and that's also something that our endpoint is giving you. And to make this a little bit more readable to humans, we'll come up with something that creates and generates HTML out of a template. And we'll show you that in a minute as well. We'll deploy that also in Node.js, and also the access to that API is also through our reverse proxy, which also handles the SSL stuff and everything for us in the productive side. Again, this picture, where do we use these calls? You see that whenever we submit the form from the front end, this is done through Axios. And if we create the account against the Keep API, this also uses Axios to write to the Domino server. Also, we use Node Mailer to send the configuration email through Domino. And we're using Axios again to write whenever the confirmation comes back. We use Axios to write, to call an agent that actually, to write the doc, first of all, to write the document into the second directory, and then we call an agent also through Axios to keep track, to change the password to a salted password, the little script agent. And then we use Pug, when we're done with that, to return an HTML readable return to the user. So that's how, this is where we use these tools and these libraries in the whole thing. So using Keep in that area means we have a couple of things to do. We're going to do, what operations are we using Keep for? So first of all, we have to authenticate against Keep to get a JWT token or a JOT token to authenticate ourselves. This is a central feature that we need, and of course, everything that we know is only working authenticated, besides anonymous access. But from a good practice, you wouldn't go unauthenticated in any way. So, in this specific case, we authenticate against Domino through an auth endpoint using Keep. We get back a JOT token that we use for in later calls as well. So we insert records into our accounts database. We showed you that a couple of minutes ago, and also later on, when the confirmation comes back, to insert the account into our second directory, which is hooked up to using directory assistance. Then we update records in the account database. We're querying account records in the accounts database, and we run a load of script agent with document context inside of this application as well. We have some other operations that we do as well, like verifying the recaptcha from the web form. That's also done by the API or by the middleware. Then the sending of the email, and also the feedback that we return from the double opt-in through Pug to Express. All that is handled in the middleware. And let's take a look at how this looks like in a quick overview. Let me check my time. Okay, that's still good. So that should work fine. So this is the structure of the middleware, and you see this looks a little bit different, right? So we have an index.js, and this index.js and for people who are not familiar with Express and a Node.js application, this is basically a very basic setup of how you build a REST API, a REST facade with Node.js and Express. So we require an HTTP server, access to the file system, require HTTPS communication for the server, the Express server itself to handle cross-site origin script measures. We have a CORS library that we use. And then this gets built into the server itself. So in this one here, we set up the application itself, the middleware application, by calling Express. And then we define or view our rendering engine, which is able to generate HTML back, dynamic HTML. In this case, this is Pug. There's tons of different libraries out there, so Pug is only one of them. I have in the bonus material to the slides, I have all the links and stuff for the tools we use. So whenever you're interested in it, you can go check them out later. And we define a folder where we deliver the templates for Pug. Pug is a template language, as I said. So you define a scaffolding HTML code that you want to return. And then you render it and pass some data dynamically to it. And Pug will render an HTML site, an HTML page out of this template and the live data that's coming out of your applications. And these templates are stored in a specific view. This is on here, and this is our very simple HTML Pug template to return for this return HTML that you get when you click on the on your email link and the API returns, okay, well, you registered, thank you, or we couldn't find you, whatever, right? So this is the way that stuff that's located in here. And then we have a couple of other stuff to do. We'll start the HTTP servers and the HTTPS servers. In that case, we'll have some certificates that we need, the certificate and the key file that we need to make the SSL encryption work. And then we define our so-called routes of the REST API itself. And these are the basic route definitions. And these are structured a little bit. This is also coming from the guys from StoreTrack, and I left that in here. So basically what we're currently working on is that all this is mostly this route here. The accounts route is what we're currently interested in for our application. The rest is other demo stuff that we don't need today. And then at the end, we start the server, so to make it listen on a certain port, and also the HTTP port. So if you're, for example, on an intranet, we can use an HTTP access. We don't need HTTPS access for it. And also we have an HTTPS server. And usually one of them should do. In this case, we have both of them, but that's also code that has been already there. So we'll keep reusing it. Okay. So as I said, the code itself that does, if I call an endpoint on this REST API, this is done through these routes that we define in here. And if you look at the accounts route, and this require statements tells you, okay, so there's a file called routes accounts.js that defines the next level of this. And this is the file right here. And in this accounts.js, we have another drill down, more or less. So we'll use a file that contains all the GET requests that we're doing, and we'll have a file that contains all the POST requests. And POST sync means we are waiting. These are not async calls, but synchronous calls that we're waiting for. So these are the two things that are into the accounts itself. And if you look at the account subfolder, then we have another layer underneath here, and this is also done with restructure. And then we have a couple of specific APIs that we want to call here. And for example, if you want to save an account, which is called through the front-end application, and we click on save or click on create account, that's stored here, and a couple of other things we want to change things and other stuff. Also go the same thing, the same methodology for the GET requests. For example, when we want to verify whether an account name is still available, that's one endpoint. If we want to check the username, for example, also we want to send a test email to see if our mail configuration is working, that's also handled here. if you look at now, if you now look into a couple of things in these GET requests, for example, or let's look at the boost first to look into the save account requests, then we have a couple of things that are implemented here. So in our case here, we have a couple of things that we import. We require our Express system again. We have Axios again that we need to call different layers. And we have a couple of things. This is human function, for example, from the global part is to check for the capture token that we have built in. And then we have more or less a body traversal to do. So whenever we call this this endpoint from our front-end application, we receive the data that we have filled out in the form in the body of the request, right? So we'll parse the body right here, grab a couple of items out of it, and then we'll create a new registration. And this is a separate method that is also, again, in a different library, which is here, which is an asynchronous function. And this, again, is mapped against another one in the global one. So it's really a little bit stacked together, but it'll tell you, it gives you a little bit of an overview of what's happening here in that specific case. And I think that's the one that we want to talk about now. Let me just grab those. There's a couple of things. In here, but this is basically the structure how we work with these features with these functions here. We also have the call for the account in the secondary directory. We have the code here for sending the mail through the mailer. That's also done in here, and the salt password part is an agent call. And this is here, for example, just to give you a glimpse of what we changed here from coming from the app dev pack to Project Keep. This is more or less the code that you need for calling a Lotus script agent in Keep. So first of all, we have our agent endpoint, which is the endpoint that Keep is giving us. And we'll show you the configuration for this in a minute. Then we have to authenticate against Keep if you're not authenticated yet. So we get a token back. And then we have our a configuration for our HTTPS client. So we have to give the authorization. This is our token. We'll give this an authorization header. We'll define the content type. And then we'll do a post call against this agent endpoint. We'll hand the body data that we receive in here and the Axios config, and return an error whenever, or return a success or an error whenever, if this worked out fine. So this is basically the way that you would deal with Project Keep in calling endpoints through an Axios call. And this is basically the same thing. If you want to do this for creating documents, updating, and stuff like that, it's totally, it's always the same basic notion. And the great thing about Project Keep, what I like the best, is you get a Swagger UI for the Domino API, for Domino REST API, so you can check those things out. And Tilo showed us this on Tuesday already. So these are the data methods that we've been calling. We can call. So this is, for example, to post a document. And so with that, this gives you the structures on how you have to deliver the data. And if you're logged into this, you can try this API out right here, and you'll get a call and a lot of sample data in here. So you find you can find every method and every API endpoint and API call, and the definitions of what to use right here, as well as, for example, the authentication endpoint that you saw right here. This is the auth endpoint to get your job token to get you started. So all of this is documented for you. And let's head on back to the presentation to speed those things up. And before we do that, let's quickly hop into the Keep admin to show you what we've actually had to build to make this work. I think I have to authenticate it again. No. Okay, so we're almost done. Okay, database management. So this is our, for example, our application that we have. We have a one form configured, which with the fields that we want to work with through Keep. So those are the fields that are accessible to us. And what we also needed to do is, as we want to query data, we had to define another mode, how this is called, for DQL to make the fields accessible to us through a DQL query that we needed to query those things. Same thing that we did for the partner directory, where we have two forms, the accounts and the person document defined. And also we defined a couple of things, a couple of views, for example, in here. And we also configured, okay, now it messed up we defined the load script agent that we need to call through the API as well. So all of this has to be configured in Keep to make it accessible through the API itself. So the good thing is, why a Node Express-based facade? There's another question, why would we build that? Well, because if you have to traverse from one API to the other, API calls tend to change, right? And what I like to do is building interfaces. Interfaces reduce your dependencies between the layers of your application. And I barely ever talk to a vendor API directly from a client or an SPA, because vendor APIs tend to change and vendor APIs get abandoned. And if you look at Microsoft, for example, with what they do with their Exchange Online REST APIs, well, these are changing constantly every couple of years. So if you want to change your front end and your back end and your middleware all the time, have tightly coupled things. If you want to decouple those things, then it makes sense to build your own API structure before that to encapsulate those things and only build interfaces. Also, if you have to do things that are not part of the vendor API, things like checking a reCAPTCHA, for example, as we did, then that's a good way to do this as well. And as we changed now from, as we transitioned now from DominoDB over to the Keep APIs, we didn't have to do anything on the front end, right? The front end is totally untouched. We went through those, and this is more or less the end piece. Both implementations are still working and would be usable. And having this somewhat orderly designed facade, the switch from the AppDev pack to Keep was really, really straightforward and very easy to accomplish in that particular case. Bear in mind, this is a very simple application that we showed you. We don't have, for example, user context and stuff like that. And if you want to build stuff that authenticates you as a Domino user and make use of reader fields and stuff like that, things get a little bit more hairy with Keep as well, as far as I know so far. You should have, in production at least, you should have an IDP to generate the job tokens for Keep. And we saw the problems with that in the AppDev pack arena, where a lot of people struggled heavily with setting up IAM to get OAuth authentication running with the AppDev pack. I hope we will have some good documentation in the final release of Keep when we have to deal with Keycloak or Azure AD and stuff like that to make this work very easily for people. And but right now, I think we'll see a lot of good documentation. If the documentation is staying the way it is, I think this looks really promising. Interesting enough, we did some measure on performance. So what's faster, the AppDev pack or Keep? We didn't find any differences in there, besides some minor shifts in between, depending on where you're looking at.
That's really interesting, because one's a binary protocol between your Express code and the other is HTTP.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with this specific use case is you don't transmit a lot of data, right? It's only a couple of things and very tiny bits and pieces, so it's not really. It would be interesting to see if you have like these multiple changes on documents in a row, or you put in, or you send like, or you read 200 or 1,000 documents in a row. I didn't take a look at that, but so far not that much of a difference. And also, I did not take a look. Oh my goodness! I didn't take a look into things like rich text and the admin stuff. Keep has a lot of other stuff that comes along with it. Lots of endpoints, lots of stuff to be used, and what is useful. So There's a lot of stuff to play around with, and I really encourage you all to get your feedback with it. And that, we're way over time, so sorry about that delay.
Awesome work, Heiko.
That concludes it from my end, and I'm opening it up for questions if we have the time. We'll check in the chat. Okay, very good stuff. Okay. Any questions from you guys? Anyone? Anything that we would conclude this today and give the host a little bit time back to get up and running for the final session with Richard and his team? Is this going to be on the new class webinars? Yeah, basically it will. So the only difference will be that the front end will be built in React and not in Vue.js. But everything else, like the REST facade and all those kind of things, that will definitely be part of the webinar series. Yes.
And our courses are free, by the way. We probably should have said that up front.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Okay. So I don't see any more questions. I see participants dropping off.
They can join the C3UG mailing list if they haven't, and then we can reach out to them about courses. Everybody on our mailing list will get pinged about the course.
If you hit our website, www.c3ug.ca, there's a sign up way where you can sign up to our mailing list, and we will keep you posted on the latest events on the course. But we'll definitely, this will not be the only channel where we keep you updated on that.
Very low volume. You will not get spammed frequently.
Excellent.
Okay, well, should we leave it here?
Yeah, we shall leave it here. I'll stop the recording. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much, and have a good day.